we took a practical project to explain and understand Python. We're going to understand Python's core data types and collections and relate each one with real-world needs in a chat messenger app project. So we're going to see how we can do a quick review of variables, assignments, operators, and strings from the last class. Code to print a chat message with the sender's name and time. The code there, so I'm just going to copy it from here, move it over to this practice area, and here we have the code. So we want to print a message. We have a string variable called sender, another string variable called hello. We have a string variable called time. How do we know a variable is a string variable? A variable is a string variable because of the quotes around it. A variable is numeric if it's just written. If the number is written, we don't have quotes. But as long as we have quotes, then we're referring to a string. All right, and then we have the code here that prints out the time, the sender, and the message in these formats. We have seen print functions before. Sorry, print functions. So we've seen the print function before, and we said functions usually have these parentheses. So we have the name of the function, the parentheses, and then we have the content that makes the function run in between. So in this case, this is a formatted string. We have F there, and formatted string means that we can bring in variables into the string. So we're going to do a bit of ChatGPT now. Say you are learning this on your own, and then you are not sure how to go about it. So you can just copy this code exactly as it is. So let's copy it. We're going over to ChatGPT, and we're going to ask ChatGPT to explain it. So we have AI as an additional bonus to this class. So I'm going to paste it here. So I've pasted the code, and I'm saying I am learning Python programming, and I have this portion of code in the tutorial. Please break it down in simple layman terms. Your answer should not be too long. Make it, let me say, 70 words maximum. Okay, so this is helpful. So you're learning programming, you run into some portion of code that you're not sure of what it's doing. You can go over to AI and get some help. So let's see what it says. It says, sure, this code stores who sent a message, that's the sender, what the message is, that's the message, and the time it was sent, that's the time. The print line then shows all of that info in a chart-like format, like this. The F before the string lets you insert variables directly into the text using curly braces. It's called an F string, formatted string. So that's the explanation, and this is what is printed. So for you to print some information on your console or on your screen, you would need some form of string. You will need the print function, and then you also might need variables. So that's what is being said there. And you have to follow the rules. You have to follow the rules. And the rule says you use the formatted string whenever you want to put the variable. So the variable is added into the string that is being printed. So let me run this here. I run it there. And there you go. That's the output. That's the output. So we see that we don't usually just print things directly or use things directly. We usually will store them in variables. So it's just like saying in Scratch, you don't get directly to the characters. You don't get directly to them. You use the variables. You use variables to work on them. So that is good programming practice. Even though it's possible to get directly or do things directly, you always want to use variables for them. And here we see how to add variables using the curly braces. So that's the rule. So that's the first activity. Please, if there are any issues, just let me know. Second activity, we're working with primitive data types. And we have the int, we have the float, we have the bool, we have none. Okay, so the integer has to do with numbers that we can count. And in our example, in our project, we can use int to refer to number of messages in chat. Float has to do with numbers that have fractional parts or decimal parts. And in our example, we can consider it as average response time in our chats. And then bool has to do with whether something is true or false. And then in our project, it can relate to whether a user is online or not. So you see, for different things, we need different data types to capture what is being considered. And then none, user hasn't typed a message yet. That's so we have none applied, no data type applied. And so we have our examples here. We can assign variables. So now we're creating variables using data types. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it here. And then I can click on code and just paste it here. So we have, this refers to a comment. And a comment is a note you put when typing your programs. It's just a note you put to pass a message to you, and it has no effect when the program is run. So here we have comments, just to say that what we have below here is an int, an integer, and that's the number which we assign to the variable called messages underscore sent. And this is another way to commonly used to name variables, where we have two words defining the variable and then we separate them using an underscore. That's because you cannot create a variable with a space. It has to be one full word. And here we have an integer, no decimals. Here we have a float, but we have the decimal, and this is the average response time. So probably want to find out when a chat or a request has been made in our app, what's the average response time? Or how quick on the average does a reply come to that chat? So in that case, we're not going to have integers all the time. We're likely going to have decimals. And then bool, we want to check, is someone online or not? That will not be answered by a number or a string, but by a Boolean. So it's either true if they're online or false if they are not. And then we also have none when nothing has been imputed yet, and then we can assign that to these variables. So that's just a recap on naming variables and then the different data types. So next up, we're going to look at checking and casting. And here, we're going to see how that relates to our projects. Chat apps often need to validate data. For example, phone number must be digits. And so we're going to look at the type function, the isInstance function, and then we also look at casting. So what happens here is that there are certain times we need to change the data type. So here we're saying we have different data types, integers, floats, Boolean, and all of that. If we have something that is just to be counted, we will be using an int data type. If we have something that is to be measured, we'll be using a float. If it's something to be checked, whether it's true or false, we're using a bool. And then, of course, we've also worked with strings. If it's something that has to do with a string of characters and something like language, we're using the string. So we have different variable types. Now, there are certain times we need to use certain functions to force certain variables. And so we have this example here. We want to validate, we want to check a phone number entry by a user. For us to check that it is valid, we need to check that it is composed of digits. So phone numbers usually don't have letters or alphabets. So if we are asking the user to type their phone number and they mistakenly typed an alphabet, that is going to introduce an error. So we have to be able to validate what the user entered. And the way we validate that is to check the type. So we have an example here. So we're going to take this and move it over. So these are some of the practical applications of these functions, type checking and casting. So if you look at this very closely, you'll see that we have the int type, the int data type, and then we also have the int function. Remember, whenever you see this parenthesis, it refers to a function. So this is an int function. This is an str function referring to string. This is an instance function. This is a type function. Okay. So let's see what's happening. We move this over here and we have to try and interpret our code. So I paste this here and then this came with this. So I have to remove this. Here we see this is a string variable. We have the quotes there, and then it is called user underscore input. So that's the user's input. The user imputed 25, but not as a number, not as an integer, but as a string. And you can see this is colored. You see, this is an integer. Sorry, that is colored red for the string, whereas this integer here without the quotes is colored green. So this is not 25 as a number, it's 25 as a string. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to check the type. Okay, so you see the comments here. This is actually a string, and over here we are sending the variable user underscore input as a parameter to this type function, and then we are sending the whole thing to the print function. So you can see that we can have functions inside other functions. So let me try and give a space here. This is the print function. This is the print function with the blue parentheses. That is it. And then inside that print function, we have this type function. And that type function has the user underscore input as the variable. So that's the progression. And what it's doing is going to check the type, the data type of what is in this user underscore input variable. And of course, we can see it's a string. And then it's going to print or display that data type to us. So that's a progression. And over here, we are casting. So you see what is happening here? We are applying this function int to user underscore input. So if we want to understand this code, we see user underscore input here, we have user underscore input here, we have user underscore input here. This is important. This is where user underscore input receives its value. And over here, we are casting. That's what it is. It's a string, but here we are casting it to become an integer. And we're assigning that to age. And then we come over here, and then we do something similar to what we did here. We're going to check the type. So we're checking the type. Now we're supplying the age variable, and then we are printing it out. We're printing it out. So now let's copy this and go over to ChatGPT and say, what about this? And then it said, great, here's a simple breakdown. User underscore input is equal to 25 means you are storing the number 25 as text or string, not as a number. Type function with user underscore input as a parameter checks the data type. It's a string. And then int function with user underscore input converts the string to an integer, which is a number you can do maths with. And then type with age then confirms it's now an integer. This process is called type casting. So you see, this is just a short explanation of what is happening in our code. So let's run it, and we're going to see the outputs. Okay, so you can see the first output here says that this print is telling us that user underscore input is str or string. And the second one says that this print is printing the type of age and saying it is now an int. So you see how we converted 25 from the string that was typed into an integer. So that's that about type checking and casting. So we frequently do this in programming. we have a variable, we need to check the type, because the type will determine what we can do with it. And then certain times we need to cast. Now, one of where this plays out is that if you have a text area where users are supposed to type certain things, usually what is accepted there is a string. What is accepted there is a string, because we have sentences and words typed there. The moment you want to collect a number, it will first come as a string by default. Then you now have to do casting. You now have to change it to become a number. So generally, wherever you are expecting people to type different things, like maybe their name, their age, the date, or whatever, usually by default, they are usually accepted as strings. Then whatever they are typing or bringing in has something to do with a number, then you now have to cast to change it. So in practice, that's how we do. And then we're now going to look at collections. Collections, very important too. So we have four main collections. We have the list, we have the tuple, we have the set, and we have the dict, referring to dictionary. So let's see how these can be helpful. Let me see how long we have. Okay. All right. So we got, let's see how we can wrap up this class. Okay. So now we're going to go with the list first. Look at the list. And here you see the list can refer to chat history. So user is typing, making different entries, typing in the messenger, and we can build a history. So probably they typed hi first, and later they typed hello, and later they typed how are you. Instead of having three different variables, we can put them together in a list. And so we have this code here. I'm just going to copy it, and then we begin to understand that there are times when we deal with variables as single entry or single elements. Okay, so here we just have a single element applied to this variable. Now we have scenarios where we have more than one. So in that case, we will separate them using commas and then put them the way they are. In this case, they are strings, so we still have the double quotes around them. And then we put these angled brackets around them, and that forms a list. Is a group of variables of similar type, and then we also assign it a name. So chat_history has three items, and they are hi, hello, and how are you. So probably the user entered hi first, and later entered hello, and later entered how are you, and we're dealing with the three of them, the three entries as the chat history, and so we combine them like this. And over here we now have chat_history, which is what was defined here, dot append. So if we're studying it, we should begin to realize now that this is a function. This is the append function. Okay, so this is an append function. It takes in this string and find things, and then we have this dot operator. So this append is applied to this chat_history, the list, and then later we're going to print it. So let's go over to ChatGPT and ask it to explain what is happening here. And so we come over here, and then I'm not even telling it what to do. I just pasted it, and it kind of understands. Yeah, it kind of understands what I'm asking. So it says, here's a simple explanation. Chat_history is a list, a collection of messages. More than one variable entry. It's a collection. Now, .append and find things adds a new message to the end of the list. So we see, we can increase the contents of the list by using the append message. But we need to write the list name, use dots, and then attach the append function. So that's how it works. We want a list to grow. So as the user keeps entering making their entries into, say, a text field, we can be appending each new entry to the list, and then we print it. And then when we print it, we begin to see that this is what we should get. Now, assuming this is not clear to you, you can still say, explain it a little more easier. I am still not clear on this. Okay, so let's see. It says, no problem. Here's a simpler explanation. Here we go. It says chat_history is like a box holding several messages. At first, the box has hi, hello, and how are you. Dot append I'm fine, thanks means adding this new message to the box. And then print chat_history shows everything in the box. And you see, we have this simple explanation here. Think of a list as a line of messages stored together. And then practically, we are dealing with a chat messenger app. And remember, just like when you're working on WhatsApp or Telegram, users are constantly making entries. So now we get to see how the app is programmed to track the entries. You know, we could use lists for that. So I'm clicking on that, and there you go. So you see, chat_history started first with 3 items. We appended or attached something extra, and then it was added to the end. So that's that about lists, and we're applying functions. So we're looking at lists, and we're also looking at functions. And then we also have the tuples. And then in this case, we have immutable user information. So let's go over to ChatGPT and say, please explain tuples and differences between list and tuples in Python. Okay, so and that's because when you look at this, you can see that the tuple also has items separated by comma. What's the difference? The list has these angle brackets, and then the tuple has this parenthesis bracket. So that's the difference. Both of them have a similar way of accepting entries, you know, using the comma. And here we're going to see what happens. So we're coming over here. Let's see what ChatGPT will tell us as a difference between a list and a tuple. It says a tuple is like a list, but you can't change it once it's created. So, for example, we have this here, apple, banana, cherry, separated using commas. They're all strings, and then they have this bracket. So remember, the list will have this angle bracket, whereas the tuple will have this type of parentheses. So what is a list? A list is a collection of items that you can change, add, remove, or update. So here we see the difference. It's a tuple, and this is a list. So whereas in the case of the list, you can change, that is, it's mutable. A tuple is immutable, and this is the syntax. And the list is slower, the tuple is faster because it's fixed. And when you use a list is when the data will change, and when you use a tuple is when the data should stay fixed. So think of a list like a backpack you can open and change. A tuple is a sealed box. You can look inside, but not change anything. Okay, so now let's go over here and then copy the code. And then in cases where you have fixed information, so for example, in this case, you have the name and the country. So now you see, we're trying to store information about a person and their country, and we don't want it to be altered, or we don't want anything added you know, to it. We use a tuple, not a list. If we use a list, we could mistakenly append something, but if we use a tuple, we can keep it fixed. We'll send that to user_info, and then we're going to print user_info, and we're also going to print the item in that tuple with the index 0. So by default, the items of the tuple are indexed 0 and 1. So let's see what happens now. We print it, and then we're just printing the first one there. So we see that's how to do it. You write the name of the tuple and use these brackets, and then you put the index there. So if I change this to 1 and I run it, you see it's printing the second one. And then let me try and force an error. I make this 2, and you see there's an error there because we only have index 0 and index 1. So that's also something to note. And these are the syntax issues. We should know when to use what brackets. We should also know, how all of that works. So we're moving over next. Then we have the set. So we have the set, and then we have unique users in group chat. So when it comes to sets, we have unique users. So I'm going to copy this and paste this here. And then let's go to ChatGPT and say, now I have been introduced to another collection. And then I paste this, and I can say, please explain. Okay, and here it says, great, you have now met a new collection type, a set. So a set is a collection that doesn't allow duplicates. It has no specific order. It's written in curly braces. So the first one was in angled brackets. The second one was in the parentheses, and this one is in curly braces. So we need to understand it. So it now says, even though Adejo is written twice, the set keeps it only once. Okay, so let's see. This is what is returned. So think of a set like a guest list. No one is listed more than once. All right, so let's come over here. And what we have is, this is a set. We send in entries. We purposely repeat some. They're similar to the list and the tuple, separated by commas. We put our curly braces around. We assign it to this group underscore users, and then we print the group underscore users. And let's see, it doesn't print the 4 items there. It prints them just once. So there are certain cases where we need to use a set. And that's when we want to refer to unique users, for example, in a group chat. So even though probably we have someone making several entries or several inputs, if we want to know just how many people are in the group chats or how many people made some comments, we can use a set. And then even though we have several entries, it will just pick one and bring for us. Finally, we're going to look at dictionaries. And dictionaries here have to do with something like user profiles. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, and you see the style I'm using is to go to ChatGPT. Okay, and then I'm just going to paste this, and then it's going to tell us what the dictionary is all about. It says, here's a simple explanation. User underscore profile is a dictionary, a collection of key value pairs. Each key, like the username, links to a value like the name Adejo. And then we now print the user underscore profile, and then we also print the username, which looks up the value for the key username and shows it. So now think of a dictionary like a labeled folder. You ask for a label and it gives you the info. So there you go. This is what we have. This is what we have. And so let's look at it over here. So we're going to paste it here. And here we see that in the case of the list, we have a normal collection of items that we can add, we can append, it can grow. We now come to the case of the tuple, and we're using a different type of bracket system, and this one remains fixed. It cannot be altered. And then here we have the set. In this case, we have unique entries, duplicates are not allowed. And here we now have the dictionary where we can have key value pairs. And now we begin to appreciate that sometimes when we are referring to certain objects or certain entities, we may not be able to use a set or a tuple or a list to properly identify them. So for example, when it comes to a particular user profile on our chat messenger app, we need to have their username, some information about whether they are online, and the number of messages they have sent to properly describe them. So we have a group, we have different users in the group, and each user has a username. So we are going to put the username variable and the value as a pair separated by this column. And then whether they are online or not, we have that online variable. And then here we have a Boolean. Is either true or false? True if they are online, false if they are not. And then we have messages underscore sent, which is the number of messages they have sent, variable, and then this is the value. So now we need a dictionary. So the dictionary has a combination of several parameters defining like an object. Okay, so we also have the curly braces, and here we have the different parameters separated by the comma, but each of the pairs are represented with this column, with a column defining them. So it takes a while to get to understand the different, syntax arrangements. Yeah, so here we are using the curly braces and the colon, and here we're using the curly braces, and over here we're using this parentheses, and here we're using the angle brackets. Okay, so these are some of the important foundations in Python, and we got over that. And then here we have the mini challenge. Okay, I think we're just going to stop here and we look at the basics. So maybe in another class we can look at the mini challenge where we try to bundle everything together. So so that's that about some of the basics. We looked at variables, we're looking at data types, and then we're looking at collections. Collections in this case, we look at the list, we look at the set, we look at the tuple, and we look at dictionary. And we saw the differences, and we also saw examples of scenarios where we use them in our chat messenger app. So that brings us to the end of today's class. And this was held on Telegram, but would be edited and sent to YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, I'd like to say that you should like this video and also make some comments. We want to see what you think in the comment section. We want to know what you learned, what stood out more for you, and then also subscribe to this channel where you're going to see more and more videos around things like learning programming. This is Coding Keywords, and I am Dr. Adejo, the lead instructor here. So you can learn programming, you can learn about AI, you can learn data analysis, you can learn design using tools like Canva. All skills related to tech, we try to introduce them here, and you're sure going to have a wonderful time learning different aspects of tech.